sinners, and saints. Dust off those horns and halos. It's time for Alan After Dark.
I really can't remember how many times I've talked about being a person who lives by themselves, who's single, and how I define myself as living by myself and not living alone. Because alone makes it sound like you're lonely. And I've said several times before, the only times I've ever felt lonely was usually when I was in a crowded room, feeling isolated, but never at home when I'm by myself. Well, the other day, I was sitting on the couch and I don't know, there was just this wave of depression that swept over me as I was thinking about the state of the world right now and how messed up everything is, how America is becoming the new Nazi Germany. And I was thinking about all the things that can go wrong with what's happening and how much damage it will do to us as Americans, those especially that are opposed to this fascist regime. And I felt fear. And then I realized that sense of fear affected me in a way that made me feel lonely. The loneliness came from this sense of vulnerability that I was all alone and going to have to face a battle or a war without that same support that people that are married have, that are in relationships. And yes, I have a really close circle of friends and people that I can rely on. But I started thinking about that. If things really do go bad, they will rely on their husbands, their wives. They will rely on their family unit within their own home. Well, here I am living by myself. And if, let's just say, civil war broke out, well, what am I supposed to do? Where do I go? Who do I count on? I know that I can count on myself, and I know that that can get me a long way. And I also know that sometimes being a single person, it's easier to escape, to manage and maneuver, get yourself out of situations where a whole group of people, or say a child, might become challenging for what you need to do. I mean, let's be honest, in every apocalyptic movie where the world is ending, it's almost always a child that forgets something that's important, wanders off when they're not supposed to. They always use kids in these movies to push the story in certain ways. But I get in real life, your children are your whole world. And I totally understand that. And I understand the sacrifice you make. I'm trying to put this in terms of me being single and trying to maybe rationalize good things about being single when it is the end of the world. When I was sitting there on the couch and that wave of depression and fear swept over me, I really did feel hopeless. I felt like, what is the point of doing anything? What is the point of me trying to salvage a life, to go to work, make a salary, go out to a bar 2 times, maybe 3 times a week, and a couple of times getting drunk? If that's all there is, then what's the point? Now, I know that sounds just like a midlife crisis, and perhaps that's what this is. But I know that it's being exacerbated because of the world that we're living in right now. I still can't wrap my head around the fact that so many Americans are racist and bigots and really want to pretend like they voted for this garbage that's happening. I just, it's like, can somebody do something with him to make him feel like he's actually a man or something? Because obviously he is missing something in his life, some sort of great void in his life. And who I'm talking about is, you know who, the orange turd. I just don't understand what is the motivation for that person other than he has dementia and doesn't know what he's doing. That would make total sense. But anyway, that also angered me, is that if this all goes bad, he gets to be spared. He won't have to suffer for anything unless the world goes to war and it becomes nuclear. Then we all suffer. Nobody gets out of that unscathed. But you start thinking about it in your own life. It really does hit home hard, especially when you're like me and you're an overthinker. But what scares me the most is that, not that I'm trying to brag here, but I predicted this. Everything that I predicted so far has come true. And I've told people over and over, and they just don't want to believe me, even though I've forced a couple to admit that everything that's happened so far are things that I said would happen. And that's what scares me about what I've predicted for our future. Well, that prediction was no future. A total, complete economic collapse that leaves hundreds of millions of people to die of starvation. Absolute poverty. A country that once was the greatest will be the largest fall since the Roman Empire. But we have to exist beyond that. If you're still alive, whether there's a United States of America or not, you survive. You have to exist, right? Or do you just end it right there? I don't know. I've always said I would never commit suicide. And in a normal world, I never would. But if my choice is starvation or a concentration camp, I think I would choose the easier way out. I'm not going to be held in a prison or a cage the rest of my life to be tortured and worked to death. That's not what America was about. Notice that I said was. But sitting there on the couch, it just once again was one of those reminders of our own humanity, how fragile we are, how short life is, and how rare a long life of happiness is. If you've managed to live an entire life without ever having sorrow, sadness, or fear, that would be amazing. It would also be untrue. What I'm saying, I guess, just to get to the main point, after that moment sitting on my couch, I understand loneliness a little bit better. I still don't think you sacrifice your principles just because you're lonely or afraid. Could you imagine starting a relationship with somebody because you're afraid of being alone? It just doesn't feel like it's a solid foundation to build a relationship. But I could be absolutely wrong. I think that if you're communicating with this other person and you're really telling the absolute truth about how you feel, why you'd want to do it, and you agree, that's one thing. But I don't think if you're the one who's afraid of being alone and afraid of what's happening in the world, and you don't tell the other person, then I think you're deceiving them and you're allowing your fear not only to manipulate them, but manipulate you. You're convincing yourself that you're doing good by being a partner to this person, even though you really don't want to be a partner, you just don't want to be alone. That was harsh, I know, but sometimes we need cold, hard facts to hit us in the face. You know, the character of Bill in The Last of Us comes to mind. When the world was coming to an end, he was a prepper. He called himself a survivalist, and he was happy that everybody was dead. He created his own little haven in his little neighborhood, secured it. He knew how to hunt and prepare food, and he knew everything about self-defense and weaponry and electricity, irrigation, you name it, he could do it all by himself. And then along comes Frank, and they wind up falling in love. And one of the best lines on the show was when Frank surprises Bill with strawberries, and Bill says, "I never was afraid until you came along." And of course, that's because now he's got something to lose, something he cares for deeply. I think that if I was going to be in a relationship, that's the type of relationship I would want. But then it goes back to the time I told you all that I was talking with a few friends, and we talked about creating a Golden Girls kind of situation where we all lived in a house, we all had our own bedrooms and bathrooms, and we ended our days like the Golden Girls. But that would be open communication with friends, not husband material. Friends. And that would work too in an apocalyptic situation. Of course, no one wants to lose their humanity. And science fiction shows us that in situations where the world has ended, the first thing to go is civilization. People lose their humanity. They become more primitive. It's survival of the fittest. And people will do whatever it takes to survive. And others just want to plunder and pillage and destroy. And let's face it, one middle-aged guy out on his own doesn't have much of a chance to survive after an apocalypse. Now, do they? I just feel this overwhelming sense of dread about what's coming. It's almost like, well, if it was here already, then we would know, and then we could try to make decisions about what to do. But this is like The Walking Dead, The Last of Us, and Handmaid's Tale all wrapped into one. I do believe that we're heading into a major economic collapse, for one. And if this made-up controversy over Greenland accelerates, intensifies, and we go to war with NATO, there's a very good chance it goes nuclear and the world's done. And before you try to cut me off and say, no, Greenland's been resolved, that's all settled, do you really believe those fucking liars? Really? I sure don't. But I think I've always said, though, if we know the bombs are coming, just go outside and close your eyes and let it evaporate you and just be over with. You wouldn't have to deal with any of this bullshit after that, you know? I do remember the days when I was dating someone and I was in love. I remember one time I was in one place and he was in another, and these terrible storms hit the town where he was at. And I was just absolutely beside myself not being able to get in touch with him. I was so worried that he was hurt, or even worse, dead, that I couldn't think straight until I heard that he was okay. I know those feelings, that kind of love is great. But my God, the sense of fear and dread, always worrying about them getting hurt or being hungry or cold or sad. You just want to make everything better for them. And you wonder sometimes, this is my cynical side, would they do it for you? And that's when the issues that would arise from an apocalypse. Would someone you love betray you? See, this is how an overthinking mind works. We always try to map out scenarios of what would and what will happen. And that sucks sometimes. But what is the answer? What's the answer for me? And I'll tell you right now, I don't know. I am not sure. I'm not sure what I want. Well, I can tell you this. I do want peace. It'd be nice to live in a country where you don't have to worry about this militia breaking down your front door and dragging you out, putting you in a concentration camp, or sending you off to a prison in Latin America. And that's what added to this level of depression for me. I don't know if you've all ever done this, but I've done it a few times, but I've tried to put it out of my mind. But it's hard to do that when you're an overthinker. Like, say, just trying to calculate how many years you might have left if everything was optimal. And I would say, if I'm lucky, I might have 20 years left. If I'm really lucky, I might have 30 to 40 years left. But when you start thinking about that, that means that most of us are pretty much halfway through our lives, or at least 1/3 through our lives. And you start realizing quickly how short life is, and you start sort of taking stock, thinking about all the things that you wish you had done that you haven't. And I can be honest, I've done almost everything that I wanted to do. But there's more to life than what I'm living, and there's more to life than what all of us are living. It shouldn't be just getting up, going to work, coming home, having dinner, watching a movie or watching TV, going to bed, doing it all over again, going to happy hour, this night, that night, meeting up with someone, maybe hooking up for a night, feeling good for a little while, then going back to work, then the weekend, grocery shopping, laundry. We've always structured our lives in a way that makes us believe that this is the way it has to be. And the older I get, the more I realize it shouldn't have been that way. And yes, I have regrets about certain decisions I've made in my life. There's certain people that had I not met them, I would be happier today, probably. One in particular, but when we first met, when it was good, it was great. And when it was bad, it was even worse. try to remember all those wonderful, amazing times and those feelings that were so great and the sense of love and connection with another person. It's awesome, but it's important still to be honest with yourself and think about what you're willing to sacrifice and what emotion controls you the most. Is it love or is it fear? And to be quite honest, I don't have an answer for that either. Because the older I get, the more these scenarios creep into my mind about how bad it could be. What if I don't have enough money to survive on? What if I am in poor health? What if I'm stuck in some nursing home with abusive nurses? And just all the things that can go wrong. We have a homeless veteran who's missing his legs, and he's got an electric wheelchair. And I see him out on cold mornings, and I'm just like, how does this happen in the richest country in the world? How can somebody be allowed to fall that far to where they are on the streets in the freezing cold with nothing? And I remember, she haunts me to this day, driving through downtown one morning early, heading to work, one of our little parks in downtown, and she was sitting there on a park bench with a big coat on, hunched down, with her suitcases beside her. And I just realized she is just now homeless. She just recently lost everything because she took what she could with her in her suitcases. Naive to that life, I would have guessed that she was probably robbed, I don't know how many times, of her clothes and blankets or whatever else she might have had. The cruelty of life can instill fear in you, so much so that you would be willing to marry someone just for the sake of security, a roof over your head. I get it. I think we all get that. We do. Desperate times, desperate measures, right? I just wish I knew what it meant for me. It's like when you go to a funeral or you read an obituary. When people die, you'll hear them talk about how hard they worked their whole life for their families. And I wonder why we don't label the ones that don't do that. Why don't we celebrate the free spirits as strongly as we do those who literally work themselves nearly to death their whole lives? I think both are noble. Both are amazing. You know, my grandfather, my parents, they've worked themselves to exhaustion most of their lives. And it's just strange that you can work until you're age 65 or 70 for just a few brief years of retirement in your older years with weary bones and wrinkled skin and all your ailments and illnesses, when we should have been doing it when we were young. But you're not allowed in this country in particular. You'll be labeled somebody who's lazy and just a moocher and a person trying to take advantage of others just so you could lay around and goof off. But when you think about how short life is, it kind of sucks that a decision you make when you're 21 or 22 can affect and ruin or improve the rest of your life. Either way, it sucks that decisions like that have to be made when you're still a kid. And yeah, how smart were you when you were 21 or 18? I like to think that I was, but God, I wasn't. Most of us aren't. We do the best we can with what we know. And a lot of it is lessons learned, right? I was talking to my nephew when he was getting ready to move out on his own. And I told him, I said, you know what the price of freedom is? The price of freedom is electricity, rent, gas money, car payments, grocery bills. All those things come first before you even get to have any fun. That was a lesson I learned the hard way. And obviously that lesson stuck with me to today because that's my ultimate fear. It is to be homeless, unable to afford food or shelter, clothing. I can't think of a worse life than that. Yes, I will admit, fear is a driver in my life. It does carry a lot of weight when I make decisions. Is it weighing me down? Sometimes. But sometimes it doesn't. I know that was a wishy-washy answer, but in all honesty, that's all I have right now. A wishy-washy answer. Thank you for listening this week, and I'm so sorry that I'm a Debbie Downer, but that's the way life goes sometimes, isn't it? But no matter what, take life by the balls and be real. We'll see you soon.